Hi, I'm Kathy, the Celtic Nick, and this is Celtic Nick Comments.
Have you ever had a moment when you suddenly realize you're no longer one of the younger people in the family, not middle-aged, not somewhere in between, but the oldest generation still standing? It doesn't happen on a birthday. It doesn't happen when you retire. It sneaks up on you quietly. One day you're listening to your grandparents tell stories. The next day, you're the one trying to tell those stories, and nobody wants to hear them. That realization hit me harder than I ever expected. And today, I'd like to share a few memories about family, generations, what happens when people are gone who carried your history, stories we don't appreciate till they're gone. I was a generation in my immediate family. I still have siblings, still have cousins. There are a few aunts and uncles left in the extended family, but all the generations above me are gone. That changes things inside you. I grew up in a different world. When I was a child, most of our family gatherings centered around my father's side of the family. My grandparents lived today in what would seem unusual, a multi-generational household. My great-grandfather lived there, my grandparents, my grandmother's sister, my father's sister, several generations all under one roof. Today, many people can't imagine sharing a home with grandparents, siblings, and extended family. But for much of history, that's exactly how people lived. Family wasn't something you scheduled on a calendar. Family was simply who was in the room next to you. As a child, I never thought much about it. It was just normal. My great-grandfather and the sour lemon candy jar. My earliest family memories belong to my great-grandfather, my grandma's father. I can still see him. Gray hair, fedora hat, wooden cane, a tall man, an old man who seemed ancient to a little child. On the table beside his chair sat a jar of sour lemon candies. If we visited, brought us either candy or coins, and if we asked the right questions, he'd tell us stories about magical leprechauns and the wee folk. And he said they were real. And as children, we believed him. What he didn't tell us were stories about himself. I knew he came from Ireland as a boy. I knew he became a firefighter and eventually a fire chief. But what about the details of his life? The struggles, the adventures, the decisions, the stories we were never told, because when you're 6 years old, candy is more interesting than history. But the adults always said candy and coins, and they were probably right. The things we wish we had asked. Looking back, there are so many questions I wish I asked. What was Ireland like before he left? How long was the journey? What was his first job? What scared him? What made him laugh? What was the hardest thing he ever survived? Those answers disappeared when he did, and that's one of the strange things about getting older. You slowly realize family history isn't stored in books. It's stored in people. When those people leave, entire libraries vanish with them. My great-grandmother, Mom. My grandpa's mother was my other living great-grandmother. She was a tiny gray-haired woman whom everyone called Mom. Her home was within walking distance of my grandparents' house. An adult always took us to visit her. After each visit, Mom would give us each a coin to save or spend. I don't know much about her life beyond my childhood memories of her. She was born in my home state, I think. She grew up on a farm. Her husband worked for the railroad. I still have a photo I took of her as a kid with my own camera. She lived well into her 90s. Oh, Sunday dinners at Grandma's house. Some of my happiest memories come from my grandparents' home. My grandparents would host the big family gatherings. Christmas, Easter, Thanksgiving. The dining room table would groan under the food at it. It was extended out for all the family to sit at. The children were placed in the kitchen, and we ate at what was called the kids' table. I loved that kids' table. Today I'd give everything to sit at that table one more time. My grandfather loved to cook, especially on Sundays. He baked bread. I still remember the smell of that house, waiting impatiently for the bread to cool, watching the butter melt in each warm slice. Some memories never fade. You can forget names, you can forget dates, you can forget conversations, but you can still remember the smell of fresh baked bread from over 60 years ago. The patience of my grandparents with us kids. There were 4 kids in my family, 7 first cousins, and at times 12 children filled my grandparents' house. Now that I'm older, I look back and marvel at my grandmother's patience. 12 energetic kids running around, sleepovers, holiday chaos, endless noise. At the time, we thought the house cleaned itself. Meals were made by Grandma. I don't know who made the beds. Now I understand how much work really went on behind the scenes. The older I get, the more respect I have for the adults who quietly held everything together. The generational shift. My grandfather passed when I was in middle school. Life moved on as it always does. I grew up, married, moved 1,000 miles away, built my own life, raised a child, experienced successes and failures, divorce, starting over, eventually finding happiness again with my husband Dan. During those years, I stayed in touch with my family, but not as much. Distance has a way of shrinking relationships. You'd think there will always be another holiday, another visit, another conversation, until one day there just isn't. Funeral that changed everything. My grandmother lived into her 90s. She had been ill for quite a while, but whenever I visited, she remained chipper and cheerful. When she passed, her funeral took place on a cold, rainy day. I remember standing at the gravesite. The sky seemed to be crying along with us. But just for a few moments, the clouds parted. The sun came through. Grandma was watching us, and we knew everything would be okay. And then it was gone again. The day affected me directly more than the death before it. Not because I loved her more, because I suddenly realized something. I had moved up a generation. There were no grandparents left, no great-grandparents, no older family members to turn to except my parents. Only they were above me anymore. That realization hit me harder than expected. I became the keeper of the stories. My parents passed away, and the feeling became even stronger. There were no longer people to identify faces in old photographs. No one to explain who that distant relative was. No one to answer questions about the family stories. The chain had broken, and suddenly I understood why my older relatives were telling stories. They weren't trying to bore us. They weren't repeating themselves because they had nothing else to say. They were trying to pass something forward. They were handing us pieces of our history. We just didn't understand it at the time. We didn't spend much time with my mother's family, but one story that stands out is from the Depression era. My great-grandmother owned apartment buildings in town. No family members went homeless because they could live in my great-grandma's buildings. Her real estate passed to my grandfather and then to my mother until she sold it. There are other stories my mother told us, but most of my memories are around my father's big extended family. The story my granddaughter didn't want me to tell her. When my granddaughter graduated high school, I wanted to tell her one story from my mother's family. My granddaughter was the fifth generation in our family to graduate from that same school. To me, that felt meaningful. A thread connecting generations, a story worth remembering. To her, it was ancient history. She politely waited for me to finish and immediately changed the subject to her college plans. I don't blame her. I was probably exactly the same way. Young people are supposed to look forward, older people naturally look backward. Both perspectives are necessary, but sometimes they make it difficult to meet in the middle. The loneliness nobody talks about. One thing I didn't expect about aging was the loneliness. Not because I'm alone. My husband and I are still together, and we're fortunate in many ways. But life changes, the children grow up, the grandchildren build their own lives, friends pass away, older fathers face health issues, people become busy with their own families and responsibility, the gatherings get smaller, the phone doesn't ring, the holidays become quieter. And sometimes you find yourself sitting in a quiet house wondering where all the years went. The lessons I've learned. There's one thing I've learned from becoming the oldest generation. It's this. Ask questions now. Don't wait. Ask your grandparents. Ask your aunts and uncles. Ask them to talk about their childhoods, their first job, their mistakes, their dreams. The stories that sound ordinary today may be priceless tomorrow. Because one day you'll reach for those memories and you'll discover there's no one left to ask. Maybe that's why I wanted to tell this story today. Not because my family history is extraordinary. Most families have similar stories. People working hard, raising children, building lives, passing traditions forward, making new ones. What matters is that someone remembers. And maybe that's our job as we get older, to carry the stories for a little while, and to pass them on to whoever is willing to listen, even if they roll their eyes. Because maybe someday, years from now, they may find themselves telling those same stories. And I finally understand why they mattered. If you've lost the older members of the family, or if there's someone whose stories you still need to hear, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear about them. And if you enjoyed spending a little time reflecting on family memories and the people who shaped us, join me for other stories. Till next time, take care of yourselves, and don't forget to ask the questions while you still can.